69 billion rand in a bailout. A smart move, an elegant solution, as one of our guests were saying we were searching for. Your take?
I think this, the so-called bailout is just one part of a total solution that we're looking at as far as Eskom is concerned. The President announced in his State of the Nation address that Eskom will be restructured into three separate entities: generation, transmission and distribution. Secondly, Eskom has, of its own accord, through the instructions from the board, been on a cost-cutting exercise, and primarily that will be coal costs, maintenance costs, but also ultimately the question of how we deal with staff in the entity as well. Over the last few days, we have met with the trade unions that operate within Eskom, and what we want is to sit around the table and find a constructive solution, not just fire people and put them out into the streets, given South Africa's high unemployment rate. And I believe that we can create a climate which will enable us to actually do that.
Mr. Gordhan, good morning. Thank you for joining us on the show. So I understand you're sitting down with the unions as... Good morning. You're sitting down with the unions, as you've just said. If the unions, though, do block the government's plan to restructure Eskom, what approach will you take then?
Now, I think we are optimistic that everyone recognizes that Eskom is an absolutely essential entity for the future of our economy and our country. Secondly, that we do have a serious crisis, partly arising from its own history, but partly arising from the last few years of what we call state capture or corruption within Eskom. And thirdly, that all of us need to put the national interest first, because there will be more job losses if this entity is unable to deliver the energy security that's required by our economy. So I think we're going to have intensive consultations and discussions, as our labor law requires, and begin to envision a very different future for Eskom, where there are possibilities. For example, municipalities, which in South Africa articulate electricity in many parts of the country, have a deficit in terms of engineers and other technical staff. So there are other possibilities apart from staying within the Eskom environment itself. So it's all of these possibilities that we actually need to explore. And even on the financial side, what the minister announced yesterday in the budget speech is the beginning of what the state can do, but there's a lot that Eskom itself can do. And there are other mechanisms that are being considered, which once we've worked through the detail, we'll announce as well. So Eskom is receiving absolutely intense attention from government itself, and we intend to bring all stakeholders together so that we jointly solve the problem.
Mr. Gordhan, can I ask you, the latest line from Moody's, the budget deficit is set to be the highest in 10 years. Moody's have come out late yesterday evening. They will decide on March the 29th on whether they downgrade South Africa. They say the budget shows very limited fiscal flexibility. You've dealt with rating agencies. What do you think the risk is of Moody's going to junk?
Hopefully minimal. Firstly, recognizing that there's a particular context in which South Africa finds itself today, which Moody's and other ratings agencies understand. Secondly, that this is not a profligate government. It's very aware of its responsibilities to maintain a balanced fiscal situation as we go forward. And thirdly, that we are in a period where we are stabilizing our country and economy, and not just sitting on our haunches. The top leadership in our country has gone out of its way to create an atmosphere of confidence, welcoming investments, and if we get the energy situation right, we believe that over the next few years there's going to be a lot of investment, both from South African capital, but also global business interests as well.
Mr. Gordhan, if I can just go back to Eskom, and you were talking, of course, about more details being released on the Eskom side and how they would get through the restructuring and also, of course, the conditions needed for the state support. Investors, reading through some analyst notes yesterday, are waiting for more details on the conditions for the state support. It begs the question whether Eskom can fulfill the conditions without tariff increases, and therefore what a fair level for the tariff increase would be.
Well, on the one hand, Eskom will have to meet some of the issues and conditions that the Minister of Finance raised yesterday. For example, it will create a turnaround office, it will have a turnaround officer, it has the beginnings of a turnaround plan, both in the medium term and in the immediate and short term as well. And from our point of view as the shareholder, we'll be monitoring that situation very carefully and ensuring that the board and the management deliver upon the milestones that we've actually agreed upon. Tariffs and tariff increases are one component of the financial stabilization of Eskom. On the one hand, we can't have excessive increases because that has a negative impact on the economy. On the other hand, we can't have no increases because Eskom at the moment requires that revenue stream. So a modest increase will be appropriate, but of course that's not in our hands. In South Africa, we have an independent regulator which will look at all of these factors and then make its decision.
Mr. Gordhan, the risk to markets, the risk to the rand is between now and March the 29th. The central bank assesses the banking system has enough capital to withstand a downgrade. Would you concur with that? Is the banking system strong enough to hold up if there's a downgrade? And also, what pressure would come to bear on the currency?
Well, that's an issue both for the central bank and the Minister of Finance to comment on. But remember that South Africa had even a bigger challenge in 2008, 2009, when the Great Recession began to have an impact on our economy. We had a sudden drop of about 50 billion rands of revenue at that point in time. And the banking system, our banking system, came out tops, if you like, amongst just a few in the world, and proved that it was both resilient, well-regulated, and can cope with any crisis that comes our way. So using that as our benchmark, if you like, I think that we have a well-regulated banking system, an excellent regulator that's recognized for its proficiency around the world, and a well-run set of banks in the country as well.